You know what scares me more than nuclear war? It's not the blast, not the radiation. It's what comes 3 microseconds after the detonation, when every circuit board in a 1,000-mile radius gets fried by an invisible wave of pure electromagnetic chaos. And if you think your Tesla is going to roll you out of the danger zone when that happens, you're not just wrong, you're dangerously unprepared. So if you're serious about understanding what an EMP really does and how to protect yourself when the grid collapses, hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to tell you could save your life when everyone else is standing in the dark, wondering why their car won't start. Let's get one thing straight from the beginning. An electromagnetic pulse isn't some Hollywood special effect where all the lights flicker and then everything magically comes back online. It's a real, documented, devastating phenomenon that's been tested by militaries around the world, and the results are terrifying. When a nuclear weapon detonates at high altitude, we're talking 25 to 300 miles above the Earth's surface, it releases 3 distinct pulses of electromagnetic energy. The first pulse, called E1, hits in nanoseconds. It's a sharp, intense spike that induces massive voltage spikes in electronic circuits. This is the killer for microchips, integrated circuits, and anything with delicate semiconductor components. The second pulse, E2, is intermediate and similar to lightning strikes. Your surge protectors might handle it if they survived E1, but most won't. The third pulse, E3, is a slow, powerful wave similar to a geomagnetic storm that can last for minutes and destroys transformers in the power grid. When you combine all 3, you get complete infrastructure collapse. The United States government knows this. In 1962, they detonated a 1.4 megaton nuclear warhead 250 miles above the Pacific Ocean in a test called Starfish Prime. Streetlights went out in Hawaii, 900 miles away. Burglar alarms triggered spontaneously. Telephone systems failed. And this was 1962, before we had computers in our pockets, before smart grids, before electric vehicles with tens of thousands of microprocessors controlling every function from braking to steering. That test proved that high-altitude EMPs work, and they work devastatingly well. The Soviets ran similar tests over Kazakhstan in 1962 and knocked out a power plant, started fires, and destroyed communication lines. These weren't theories. These were real events with real consequences, and the technology we depend on today is 1,000 times more vulnerable than what existed back then. Now let's talk about your Tesla, your Rivian, your fancy electric vehicle that you think represents the future of transportation. Every modern EV is essentially a rolling computer network. The battery management system alone contains hundreds of sensors and microcontrollers constantly monitoring voltage, temperature, and charge distribution across thousands of individual lithium-ion cells. The motor controller uses pulse width modulation through insulated gate bipolar transistors to regulate power delivery. The regenerative braking system requires split-second calculations from multiple processors. The navigation, the touchscreen, the automatic emergency braking, the lane-keeping assist, all of it runs through interconnected electronic control units communicating over controller area network buses. When an E1 pulse hits, it doesn't just damage one component. It cascades through the entire electrical architecture, inducing voltage spikes that exceed the breakdown voltage of every semiconductor junction in the system. Your Tesla won't just stop working. It will become a 4,000-pound paperweight with a battery pack that might be permanently bricked because the management system that prevents thermal runaway is now a collection of fused silicon. But here's where people get the myth wrong. They think old cars are automatically safe, that anything pre-1980 with a carburetor and mechanical ignition will just keep running. That's partially true, but incomplete. Yes, older vehicles with breaker point ignition systems, mechanical fuel pumps, and minimal electronics have a much better chance of surviving. A 1965 Chevy truck with a small block V8 and a 4-barrel carburetor has almost nothing to fry, just maybe the alternator diodes and the voltage regulator, both of which can be replaced with hand tools. But even older vehicles aren't immune if they have electronic ignition modules, which became common in the 1970s. And if your classic car has been upgraded with an aftermarket stereo, an electronic fuel injection conversion, or a modern alternator, those components are vulnerable. The real answer isn't just about age, it's about simplicity and electromagnetic shielding. The military understands this better than anyone. Every critical military vehicle, aircraft, and communication system is hardened against EMP through a combination of shielding, filtering, and circuit protection. They use Faraday cages, enclosures made of conductive material that redirect electromagnetic fields around sensitive electronics. They install transient voltage suppression diodes and metal oxide varistors at every input and output. They design systems with redundancy, so if one circuit fails, another takes over. And they test everything in simulators that replicate the waveform characteristics of nuclear EMPs. The U.S. military spent decades and billions of dollars on EMP hardening because they know that in a real conflict, the side that maintains electronic capability wins. Your civilian vehicle has none of this protection, zero. The manufacturers aren't designing for nuclear war. They're designing for crash safety, fuel efficiency, and quarterly profits. So what actually happens to electronics during an EMP? The E1 pulse creates what's called a Compton current, when gamma rays from the nuclear detonation interact with air molecules in the upper atmosphere. This current generates an intense electromagnetic field that couples into any conductor, wires, circuit traces, metal chassis, antennas. The longer the conductor, the more energy it collects, which is why power lines and communication cables are especially vulnerable. Once that energy enters a circuit, it appears as a voltage spike lasting only nanoseconds but reaching tens of thousands of volts. Semiconductor junctions are designed to operate at maybe 5 volts, 12 volts, perhaps 48 volts in some EV systems. When you hit them with 20,000 volts, the junction breaks down. Current floods through the device. The material heats up instantly. The silicon melts or cracks. The device fails permanently. This isn't like a power surge where you might get lucky. This is catastrophic, instantaneous destruction at the atomic level. And it's not just your car. Your home is filled with vulnerable electronics. Your refrigerator has a microprocessor-controlled compressor. Your furnace has an electronic ignition and a circuit board. Your water heater might have electronic controls. Your solar panels have inverters with thousands of MOSFETs. Your backup generator has an electronic governor and voltage regulator. Even your well pump runs on a motor controlled by a variable frequency drive in many modern installations. When the pulse hits, it doesn't discriminate. Everything connected to wiring longer than a few feet becomes an antenna collecting destructive energy. The entire grid goes down because the transformers burn out from the E3 pulse. And even if you have a generator, it won't run if its control systems are fried. You'll be sitting in the dark with no water, no heat, no refrigeration, and no transportation, surrounded by devices that used to work but are now just expensive junk. The Congressional EMP Commission, which studied this threat for years before it was disbanded, concluded that a single high-altitude nuclear detonation over the central United States could affect the entire continental power grid. They estimated that if the grid went down and stayed down, 90% of the American population could die within a year from starvation, disease, and societal collapse. That's not fear-mongering. That's based on analysis of food distribution systems, water treatment infrastructure, medical supply chains, and the complete absence of transportation networks. Modern civilization runs on electricity and electronics. Remove both simultaneously across an entire continent, and you get a cascading failure that makes every disaster movie look optimistic. But let's get practical, because understanding the threat is only step one. Step two is actually doing something about it. If you want to protect critical electronics, you need to understand Faraday cage principles. A Faraday cage works by conducting electromagnetic fields around its interior space rather than through it. The key factors are conductivity, complete enclosure, and proper grounding in some applications. A steel shipping container can work as a Faraday cage if it's properly sealed. No gaps larger than the wavelength of the incoming radiation, which for EMP means gaps under about a centimeter. A galvanized trash can with a tight-fitting lid can protect smaller items. Aluminum foil, despite what internet preppers say, is marginal at best unless you use multiple layers with insulating material between them. The better option is copper mesh or aluminum screen with a conductive gasket at all seam points. What should you put in a Faraday cage? Start with communication devices, handheld ham radios, walkie-talkies, a battery-powered shortwave receiver. Include spare electronic components for critical systems, voltage regulators for vehicles, ignition modules, alternator diodes, even a spare automotive computer if you have the exact model information. Store USB drives and hard drives with important documents, maps, technical manuals, and survival information. Include a solar charge controller and a small inverter, so you can use solar panels to charge batteries once you pull them out of protection. Add a multimeter for testing circuits, spare batteries sealed in plastic, and a portable AM/FM radio for receiving emergency broadcasts if any stations come back online. None of this helps you during the pulse. It helps you rebuild capability afterward when everyone else has nothing. For vehicles, your best bet isn't protecting your daily driver. It's having a backup vehicle that's already EMP resistant. That means old, simple, and mechanical. A diesel truck from the 1980s or earlier with a mechanical injection pump is nearly ideal because diesel engines don't need electrical ignition. The fuel is compressed until it ignites from heat alone. All you need is a battery to turn the starter, and even that can be hand-cranked in a true emergency with the right setup. A small carburetor engine like a 1970s motorcycle or a basic 4-cylinder Toyota pickup with breaker point ignition gives you transportation that can be repaired with basic tools. Store spare parts and Faraday protection, an ignition coil, a condenser, a voltage regulator, a set of points, maybe a spare starter solenoid. Keep the vehicle maintained with fresh fluids, a full tank of stabilized fuel, and a battery on a trickle charger, or disconnected until needed. This isn't about daily driving. This is your insurance policy for when nothing else moves. Let's talk about what doesn't work, because the internet is filled with dangerous misinformation. Wrapping your phone in aluminum foil and sticking it in the microwave is not a proper Faraday cage. Microwaves aren't perfectly shielded, and one gap means total failure. Burying electronics in the ground doesn't help unless they're in a conductive container that's properly sealed. Unplugging devices helps with the E3 pulse and protects against grid surges, but it does nothing against the E1 pulse coupling directly into internal wiring and circuit traces. Those little EMP shield bags sold online might help with minor electromagnetic interference, but they're not rated for nuclear EMP field strengths. Most haven't been tested to military standards, and the few that have show marginal effectiveness. If your survival plan depends on a $30 bag protecting your $10,000 radio, you're gambling with your life. The other massive vulnerability nobody talks about is the supply chain collapse. Even if your vehicle survives, where are you getting fuel when the pumps don't work? Gas stations use electric pumps controlled by computerized payment and inventory systems. Refineries use programmable logic controllers and distributed control systems that will be destroyed. The pipelines that move fuel across the country use electric pumps and electronic monitoring. Within 48 hours of a grid-down EMP event, every gas station will be dry, and there won't be more coming. Diesel might last slightly longer because some farms and trucking companies keep bulk storage, but that runs out fast when everyone's competing for it. Your survival vehicle needs to be fuel efficient, or better yet, you need stored fuel with stabilizer that's rotated regularly. 5-gallon jerry cans in a shed, treated with PRIG or PRID fuel stabilizer, rotated every 12 months. 50 gallons gives you maybe 500 miles in a truck. Not much, but enough to get out of an urban area and reach a prepared location. Water becomes critical immediately. Most municipal water systems use electric pumps to maintain pressure. Wells use submersible pumps with electronic controllers. Even if you have a hand pump on your well, most people don't. And installing one after the pulse won't help because you can't buy the equipment when stores aren't operating. Treat water storage like fuel storage. Multiple 55-gallon barrels, rotated and treated, or a large tank with a hand pump or gravity feed system. Water filtration that doesn't require electricity, ceramic filters, Berkey-style systems, or even improvised sand and charcoal filters. You need at least 1 gallon per person per day just for drinking, and that doesn't include washing, cooking, or sanitation. A family of 4 needs 120 gallons for a month, minimum, and that assumes you're not doing laundry or bathing regularly. Food is the long game. When trucks stop running and grocery stores empty in 72 hours, the real crisis begins. You can't forage enough calories to sustain yourself unless you have serious wilderness skills and live in an area with abundant game. Most people will turn to violence within 2 weeks when their children are hungry. Your stored food needs to be calorie-dense, nutritionally complete, and require minimal preparation. Rice, beans, oats, pasta, canned proteins, fats like cooking oil and peanut butter, powdered milk, salt, sugar. Stored properly in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers inside food-grade buckets. These basics last 20+ years. You need a non-electric cooking method, propane stove with stored tanks, a rocket stove that burns twigs, or a simple campfire setup with cast iron cookware. Every meal you can prepare without electricity is a meal you'll have when everyone else is desperate. The psychological impact of an EMP collapse will be worse than the physical challenges. Most people have never experienced true grid-down living. No lights, no phones, no internet, no news, no communication with loved ones in other cities. The silence is profound. The darkness at night is absolute without streetlights. The uncertainty about when or if things will return to normal creates panic. Looting starts within 24 hours in urban areas. Violence follows within a week. Organized gangs form within a month. Law enforcement can't respond because their vehicles don't work and their communication networks are down. This is why distance from population centers matters more than almost any other factor. Within 50 miles of a major city, you're in the danger zone. Within 100 miles, you're marginal. Beyond 200 miles in rural areas with low population density, your odds improve dramatically, assuming you have the skills and supplies to be self-sufficient. Skills become currency in a post-EMP world. Medical knowledge saves lives when hospitals are offline and pharmacies are empty. Basic dental care, wound management, infection control, childbirth. These aren't optional skills anymore. Mechanical repair abilities let you keep essential equipment running with improvised parts. Electrical knowledge helps you wire solar panels to batteries and build charging systems. Carpentry and construction skills maintain shelter. Gardening and food preservation knowledge extends your food supply. Defense skills protect what you have from those who didn't prepare. Every skill you develop now is an asset you'll use later, and you can't download a YouTube tutorial when the internet is gone forever. Communication after an EMP becomes crucial for information and coordination. Ham radio operators have the best chance because they understand propagation, antenna design, and operating without infrastructure. A simple shortwave receiver pulls in international broadcasts that might still be operating from unaffected regions. Citizens band radio works for local communication within a few miles, and if you have a base station with a proper antenna, you might reach 20 or 30 miles. But here's the key. You need to know how to use this equipment before the emergency. Getting a Baofeng radio and throwing it in a Faraday cage doesn't help if you've never programmed frequencies or understand simplex versus repeater operation. Practice now, get your license if possible, and connect with other preparedness-minded people who share your communication plans. The financial aspect of EMP preparedness overwhelms people, but it shouldn't. You don't need $50,000 in a bunker. You need priorities and consistency. $50 a week towards stored food adds up to $2,600 a year, which buys a serious stockpile of basics. A used older vehicle in running condition costs $3,000 to $8,000 depending on your area, less than most people's credit card debt. A Faraday cage made from a trash can costs $30. Water barrels are $50 each. A good hand crank well pump runs may be $400 installed. The real cost is time and attention, not money. You're choosing to invest in resilience instead of the newest phone or streaming services or eating out 3 times a week. It's a priorities decision, and most people won't make it until it's too late. Let me be direct about something uncomfortable. If an EMP happens and you're not prepared, your survival odds are minimal unless you have skills and adaptability that most modern humans lack. The average person can't start a fire without matches, can't purify water, can't identify edible plants, can't field dress game, can't defend themselves effectively, and can't tolerate physical discomfort. They've never been truly cold, truly hungry, or truly scared. An EMP collapse is all three simultaneously for months or years. The people who make it are those who prepared beforehand, who developed skills gradually, who stored supplies incrementally, and who built community with others who think the same way. Lone wolves die. Families with plans survive. Communities with redundancy thrive. The EMP threat isn't hypothetical. North Korea has tested nuclear weapons and has satellite capability. A single satellite passing over the United States could theoretically deliver a high-altitude EMP device. Iran has conducted missile tests with warheads that detonate at apogee, the high point of the trajectory, which is exactly the profile of an EMP attack. China and Russia have sophisticated EMP weapons and have published military doctrine discussing their use. The Congressional EMP Commission warned about this repeatedly. The threat is real, the technology exists, and the consequences are civilization ending. Yet most people spend more time planning their next vacation than planning for a grid-down scenario. That's not normal, that's negligence. Your Tesla, your smart home, your connected lifestyle, it's all built on the assumption that the grid stays up and electronics keep working. That assumption is fragile. One weapon, one detonation, one pulse, and everything changes permanently. The question isn't whether you believe it will happen. The question is whether you're willing to do something about it if it does. Because when your neighbor's EV is dead in the driveway and your old truck fires up, when their food runs out and yours doesn't, when they're cold and you have heat, that preparation makes the difference between survival and becoming a statistic. And if you want to go deeper, you'll find in the pinned comment some guides and documents that can take your preparedness to the next level. Check them out when you're ready. Don't just watch this and move on. Take action. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you understand that survival isn't luck, it's preparation. And most importantly, start today, because tomorrow might be too late.